Welcome again to the live streaming of this first day of a conference, and we are here to, I just saw Jean-Eric just arrived. Good afternoon, Jean-Eric. Okay, let me introduce in a more formal way. Sorry, start again. So, welcome again to these first days and this first dialogue of the APRE Conference 2021. We are going to close this day today with this APRE dialogue, and the APRE dialogue will be another step forward, what we already started last year together with Generale, Paquet and other young from ING. And we will continue now to step forward in this dialogue, ideal dialogue between DGRTD and representative of young generation. So, Jean-Eric, thanks again for your kind availability to accept to discuss with us and with our young that we have that we will bring on the stage very soon. So, last year we started to discuss with Jean-Eric and a group of representatives from the universities radio, Italian universities radio, about the narrative problems to explain what was Horizon Europe. And that was done with an objective to try to fine-tuning the communication message right for the young generation. And that was not so easy, and was very nice for us to discover that for us that we are used to tell to our stakeholder of Horizon Europe a certain narrative, this narrative is completely not suitable for people who are not part of the scientific community. So last year we focused on the idea of narrative, and our main target was try to allow a simple narrative and explain from the Director General, Generale Paquet, to a group of young journalists, non-professional journalists, with the aim to try to elaborate a next step narrative suitable for the youngs. And we did that in several ways. I don't know if you are already starting with the video, but you can see, okay, you can see in back of my screen what was generated last year about that. So now, this year, we have invited again the Director General, Generale Paquet, again with a group of youngs, different compared to the last years. Last years were journalists, and today we have selected as a representative, clearly, because it's not possible to bring all the people on the stage or to have a too large dialogue with too many people. So we have selected a group of people, three in particular, from together with the ANG, the Associazione Nazionale Giovani, which is the public agencies who manage the youth dossier in Italy, together with the Ashoka, which is the Ashoka Italia, is part of the Ashoka International, who has launched this initiative of young changemakers. So we have together with us 3 young change makers that will help to try to analyze what really means to be engaged in the Horizon Europe. And when we say engage for a young students or a young non-students, we mean that we take care not only of the young generation that will be part of future scientific communities, and so they will be clearly directly involved in the games, but we are dealing with the young as general. So people that we will never have anything to do together with Horizon Europe as stakeholders, but they will be part of the society that in 15, 20, 30 years' time will be the ones who will benefit from the challenge that today Horizon Europe tries to solve. So again, I would like to stop here with my introduction. I just mentioned Monsieur Jean-Éric Paquet. Thanks again, Jean-Éric, to be here. And I want to mention the names. I repeat, it's just representative names. They are not the best, they are not the worst. They are person that we have selected in any case, and there will be in this dialogue today with us Ivana Calabrese, Giulia Faleri, and Fabio Frattin. So, Jean-Éric, before to start, I would like to give you the floor to, let's say, to give some kind of updates about Horizon Europe. You know, last times when we met in October, we were discussing about the starting soon of Horizon. Today, Horizon Europe is a reality, is already start. Most of, or large part of the first topics of the World Program 2021 are already gone. So, what is the situation? What's going on in Horizon Europe, and what we should expect in the coming days or coming months in front of us? So, 10 minutes is completely for you, just to give an update about the situation and to share with us your thought about. Thanks you again, Jean-Éric.
Marco, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm not entirely sure of the setup. I hope you hear me and see me, because I can just see myself. So I'm speaking to myself on the screen, which is never really nice. So apologies for my mimics and reactions to that. But I hope, Marco, that you can help me that in the second part of the meeting, because I didn't see you when you were speaking, but I hope to see Ivana, Giulia, and Fabio when they come in later in the discussion. Yes, there's a lot ongoing on Horizon Europe, but before I say a few words on that, maybe just to underline what you said, Marco, and why I accepted to participate in this meeting today, as I did last year. It's because I believe that science, research, and innovation at European levels through Horizon Europe and other instruments, but equally and maybe even more at national level, needs to engage with citizens, needs to be designed with citizens to have the outcomes and the impact on our societal challenges, which European research needs to deal with. Of course, I put a little bit aside fundamental science, which I hope some of you are looking at in terms of their own career, where indeed discovery-based research or curiosity-driven research is without a specific policy agenda. But if you take the bulk of European public research and also industrial research, the purpose of the research is to find solutions, create knowledge and find solutions through technology, sometimes also with social innovation, to deal with our systemic green transformation, and largely also to be, of course, part of this transformation into a more digital, inclusive, and digital European Union and societies. Science and research are going to be absolutely critical in these transformations. Science, as we are discussing right now in Glasgow, is the way to go if we want to accelerate, and we need to massively accelerate and upgrade our transformations, not just in Europe on climate change and biodiversity. I think we are pioneering, we are leading, but this of course needs to be a much more global effort at transformation. And for that to credibly be planned and then delivered and happen in a fast enough time horizon to reduce the risk of overshooting the 1.5 degrees of the Paris Agreement, needs to be carried by science. And when I mean science, I mean technological solutions, of course, but solutions which, on the one hand, are accepted by society, so picked up by society, used by us on a daily basis, by you, by me, on a daily basis, and solutions which also allow us to transform as actors in our society. Technology is not going to deliver a magic solution to ensure that on climate change and biodiversity, the planet is in an acceptable place, if you want, in 2030, 2040. That will also require that as individuals, our behavior, our consumerism, our mobility, our energy use changes with better technologies, more efficient technologies, but also ourselves. We need to look at the way as societies and individuals, we are part of that system, and we impact on that system. And science provides these cross-cutting, systemic approaches, which are absolutely critical to sustain that green transformation and use the digital transformation to ensure that this is inclusive and fast enough. Now, that I think is fairly straightforward, and I would expect that most of you are completely aware of that need and of this added value which science research and innovation brings. What I would like to underline and add is that to achieve that and ensure that this investment in science research and innovation delivers such an outcome, it needs to be designed with citizens. This cannot be done by scientists in labs in isolation. It certainly cannot be done by scientists in industry in isolation, with industry purposes legitimately at the heart of their thinking. It cannot be done by policymakers alone either. So we need a process where indeed science choices are made with citizens, not of course by citizens, but with citizens. So it's not just about telling you what science is, trying to reassure you that science is about progress and moving into the future, giving you a sense of how science will shape our future. That's all necessary, of course. But I think much more fundamentally what we need is that science choices are designed with you. And why? For two reasons, essentially, linked to what I said at the outset. Firstly, that science can be owned and driven by your own concerns and your capacity to change and sustain this transformation effort. And secondly, to ensure that the technologies which are devised out of science research and innovation are picked up by us, that we really use them. So the design phase and the science choices is really, for me, a key point where not enough is done, be it at national level or here at EU level as well, and where I think research policymakers which can promote that change need to be more ambitious than ever. And the Commission under Horizon Europe is particularly ambitious. We are, and I'm going to give you just one example because it's the most obvious one, and also the one which I discussed in preparation of today's meeting, and I'm sure we'll have the opportunity to dig deeper in a moment, is the European missions which are now starting, where we want to work on climate adaptation, clean oceans, better soils for better food, cancer, and climate neutral and smart cities. In these 5 missions, the Commission has set a very concrete objective, and we now want to deploy research, and out of that research then make a difference in society. So, for example, we are hoping with these European missions to find 100 European cities. No doubt there will be interested cities in Italy also, which want to, in fact, quite dramatically upgrade their ambition and tell their population, their citizens, that they want to become climate neutral at the horizon 2030. And this is, of course, super ambitious. Europe collectively wants to move to climate neutrality by 2050. We have an intermediate objective of reducing our CO2 emissions by 55% in 2030. This is possible, but this will require clearly that the cities in particular, and hopefully these 100 cities, really move beyond these 55%. The mission is about supporting that upgraded ambition, supporting it with the knowledge which we have already today, but which is not necessarily available in cities, to city authorities, to economic actors, to civil societies, to all of us, by testing and adapting the technologies, which also are largely available but are not deployed at city level and in markets and in society. But we want to do that, and we want to do that by ensuring that in each of these 100 cities, we put in place a contract where the city sets out this initiative of climate neutrality. I mean, there will be a degree, for those of you which follow climate science very closely, there will be an element of offsetting as well, which is by 2030 inevitable. And net neutrality would probably come after 2030, but no matter, I think it would be climate neutral cities. That in this contract, on the one hand, the EU level provides a much better combined set of investment support, be it under Horizon Europe as a program, but many other programs as well. That we also provide guidance on regulation. We provide also guidance and support for the cities to connect with one another and share their emerging good practices towards that 2030 objective. And critically, that cities also commit to devise their transformation plan. And as I said, it's a transformation driven by investments and technology, but also by change in the behavior of the population and the public actors and economic actors in the city, that this transformation plan is devised with and by citizens. That is a key feature of these European missions out of Horizon Europe, that citizens will be, would be and should be, and that, as said, will be part of the construction, at the heart of this transformation plan for these 100 cities. The mission is focused on these 100 cities as pioneers. I have no doubt that if successful, this will create a lot of similar action and ownership across many more cities than these 100. And I think will demonstrate that transformation plans which are designed with all of us involved at the outset are much more systemic, better thought through, but also then in implementation owned and therefore much more impactful. I finish by saying that I have no doubt that this is super difficult. I'm speaking about it to an extent from a distance, because it's not the Commission which will engage with citizens, I don't know, in Bergamo or in Siena. This will be done, and I don't know if these two cities will apply. I'm just taking them as examples. We will not do that. This will be done by the local communities and the city authorities. At EU level, we will make resources and knowledge available to support it. But this is really super difficult because, firstly, you need to decide to do it. Then you need to find the groups of citizens which are ready to spend their energy, their time. And this is where you as young people need to be at the center of that effort, because you are building your own future. And don't be misguided here. It's a joint future. This notion that it's not my future is wrong. I intend to be there until 2050 to begin with, and my children are part of it as well. So this is common future, but young people, I think particularly, need to be key drivers of this transformation effort, because you are, by the moment you are in your own lives, you have more capacity to be disruptive than probably my generation, at least to a large extent. So we need to find those of you which are ready to commit to this effort of designing this implementation plan. Then we need to ensure that this is representative, so that it can then be shown to the entire population that this has indeed been done with them, through this group, but with them, so that the ownership of the transformation effort, which is so important, is then not just in the limited group of those which would have drawn up the plan, but really then works across the entire city. And there are certainly many methods to ensure that as the implementation plan is drawn up in the next, say, 18 months, that there is interaction across the city population to ensure knowledge of the effort, and then ultimately that understanding of the technologies and ownership of the need and capacity and desire of transformation. So citizens, Europeans, but young people particularly, you will have a central role in that effort. And with that, you are certainly key in Horizon Europe. There are the dimension, of course, of science and science design with citizens, but I will spare you from those for now. If they come up in the conversation, I'd be really happy to go into more detail. Marco, back to you.
Thank you, Jean-Eric. Very, very complex introduction. You have addressed so many points. I will just stick to the couple of messages, or at least couple of words. One word is isolation. Most of the things that we have in front of us may not be in isolation. That means that the scientific community has to work together with others. And ambitions. You mentioned properly that most of the solution that will be found in the next future do not exist today, and there is a lot of job to do. So, in order to move rapidly, first of all, I would like to say that you will be together with other young people on the screen, so you will see them. Don't worry. And so the first round
Good
is.
afternoon.
Hi.
Yeah, and I can say that in the streaming it's even more appealing because there is the graphics. We are in a discussion hall, but what is outside is even better. So say that. Now I would like to move to the three. I don't want to say guest. I would say colleagues, and to present themselves with very fast way. Please, I would like to ask you to stay really in a few minutes, but I would like to introduce you through your presentation, because it's not important only your names today, but the idea that you have brought to the attention. And don't forget that we are not discussing about the idea today, but this is just an example to introduce yourself and to share with us why you have decided to become the change makers. So let's start in the order that we have already arranged, from Ivana Calabrese. Ivana, very few minutes, 2-3 minutes to introduce and to give your business card, your personal card to Jean-Éric Paquet.
Of course. Hi, thank you, and thank you for having us. I'm Ivana, and I'm working on Vox Populi Grassano, which is a youth organization that is active in Basilicata as a multiplier of opportunities and projects for Southern Italy people. The problem that I'm contributing to solve, in a few words, is mainly the lack of possibilities and opportunities for young people in Southern Italy, which results in minor rates of youth involvement in the decision-making process, high rates of depopulation and unemployment, and resistance to change and progress. And in general, we have noticed that the national population in Italy shows a very limited knowledge about region, Basilicata, and therefore its resources and its local communities. My proposal for a solution is based on 3 actions, which are promoting positive examples of active citizenship from an early age and making everybody understand their value in the local community, giving space to the spontaneous initiatives and ideas of young people, using social media as a means to raise awareness of beauty and potential of remote areas. How I'm doing it is I'm doing it basically through Vox Populi and with the kids, with other people who collaborate with me, and we carry out some different kinds of actions and projects. For example, we do have a radio show, and we spread information about Erasmus Plus in the European Solidarity Corps. We organize several kinds of initiatives and events with hundreds of participants to make the town more dynamic. And we have a video series to promote tourism and make people discover the importance of and beauty of the artistic territory and our values of monuments. And this is basically the town where we are operating. I hope you can see the video, I'm not sure. This is Gassan. So the change that I want to make happen in my territory is to see my town fully confident while facing contemporary challenges and inspire citizens to actively promote our collective growth, to make them proud of their origins anywhere they go, so that everybody can potentially become an ambassador of the territory. Thank you for listening.
Marco, I don't think I should react immediately. You want to do the 3
Yes,
first
I would like to prefer to do the 3, and after that to give you the floor and to have a dialogue with some question from the colleagues to you. Okay, so Ivana, okay, territory is local, and we move now to Giulia Faleri, that moved from a local to a worldwide approach. So please, Giulia, the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. Thank you for the invitation. I'm Giulia Faleri. I am the founder of VERSO, the company and the environmental movement I represent here. And we have the mission to make the trade an act that generates a social and environmental value worldwide. Which is the problem I started from. The first is the degradation of ecosystems worldwide due to an incorrect linear economic model, because it pretends infinite growth in a world of finite resources without taking into account the environmental and social impact. All of this causes environmental consequences and price increases that lead to health and economic crises. The second problem is the absence of a single global online and physical market focused only on the offer of sustainable products and services by verified companies. Which is my solution? My kind of solution is to create a space where doing sustainable trade,
Giulia,
a space where the flows of money that regulate the markets are transformed into
Giulia,
the
sorry.
tool.
Can you hear me? You are not in presentation mode, so we cannot see your slide moving.
We see the slides, but you're stuck on your first one.
Yeah.
Verso o nuovo futuro. The second slide did not come up, or the third one.
So you click on the slide or you move on the presentation mode as you prefer, but you can stay in this mode, but please advance your slide.
Click on the third one. Can you click on the third slide?
No, I am in the presentation mode.
Yeah, it's not moving.
It's not moving. Come back to the normal mode, not in presentation, and just click on the slide.
Okay.
Okay, don't worry, Giulia. We will take the control from here. So, sorry.
But I must say, this is quite an impressive presentation. So I think I will need the slides for once.
Sure, no.
Very substantial.
No problem. Can you control the slides?
You see it now?
Step forward.
The first one, the second one, yeah.
Yeah, the third one.
Yeah.
Okay.
My kind of solution is Vesua.
Okay, problem I'm contributing to solve. That's the slide in front of you in this moment. Giulia.
The second one? Okay. Can you see the second one?
The second one is what? Is my proposal for a solution?
My proposal for a solution,
yes. That's in the screen. Fantastic.
Okay, so which is my kind of solution? My kind of solution is to create a space where doing a sustainable trade, a space where the flows of money that regulate the markets are transformed into the tool that allows people to create a positive impact on society, environment, and economy. Since there are three elements to be considered interconnected and interdependent for an ethical and fair progress. How I do this? Through my company VERSO, which is the omnichannel marketplace where to sell and buy sustainable products and services. I think VERSO can contribute to this problem because we buy degraded land where we create forests with revenues. We have a proprietary algorithm to evaluate sustainability of companies, and we have a card that connects physical retail to the online. So VERSO is an ethical and fair space where to trade. And for this reason, our mission is making the trade an act that generates social and environmental value. The change I want to make happen, changing the trade into an act that creates a social and environmental value, thanks to people and companies. It means making the trade capable to improve the society we live, because every time we make a purchase, we are also making a choice, and we are communicating the kind of world we want to live in and the kind of consuming society we want. So consuming and buying sustainable is a concrete act to communicate the kind of world we want to live and to trigger a process of sustainable development. At the same time, companies have to have to task and to intercept social needs and requirements to translate them into sustainable products and services by generating a positive impact on community and environment. Because using money to create social and environmental value is at the basis of a fair progress for our society. And for companies, I think that being sustainable is no longer a choice, but a duty and a great competitive advantage. Because the growing consumer society is demanding for sustainability, and it will decide who can stay on the market. And being profitable is more and more connected to the ability to progress and to have solutions for the changes without never affecting the ethical, social, and ecological aspect. And I'm concluding saying that every process in society depends on the availability of natural stocks in every sector. I mean, from the agriculture, the transports, buildings, and so on. So conserving ecosystems means to protect the economy, the health, and the public spending. Because because the ability of economic systems and healthcare are threatened by the exploitation of resources and externalities. And a solution to reverse this trend could be generate profits and use them to create shared value for the community by implementing a circular economy where every waste is transformed into a new resource for other new business processes.
Okay, Giulia, long speech, so a lot of messages, but step forward with Fabio. So we'll give you the last floor to Fabio. Generic Fabio comes from a scientific application. So the first two was more not directly scientific, but the idea, the project that comes from Fabio. So Fabio Frattin. Fabio, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Fabio, one of the co-founders of Algor, which is a newborn startup operating in the process of innovating the education sector. During our studies, and especially during last year, we became aware that despite the extensive usage of cutting-edge technologies in most of the processing happening behind us, such as telecommunication, advertising, transportations, industrial productions, the same was not true for processes directly linked to social good. At the same time, we had the opportunity to realize that the education system is struggling to innovate because it's still based on a simplistic idea that it exists an average student around which the system can be built and optimized, while in reality, everyone has its own difficulties and its way of expressing its potential, its way of learning. That's why we, as a team of tech-educated guys, let's say, want to put our knowledge in the effort of exploiting the broad possibilities that are fostered by those new technologies, such as artificial intelligence, just to mention one. We want to help students to express their potential, and our idea at high level is to build a digital environment, a digital platform where students can actually smoothen their difficulties and express their potential and their talent. We, Algor, are a team of data science students from Politecnico di Torino with different backgrounds. And the first product that we developed is Algor Maps, which is the first web application that supports students affected by specific learning disorders into building concept maps starting from a text in an automatic fashion, thanks to our AI algorithm. Just to give a little bit of context of why such tool is so important and can be helpful for them, students that are affected by SLD are not able to learn the same way that people usually learn. So by reading, underlining, and repeating again and again and again, because they have a much more sophisticated visual memory. And the concept maps are currently the most used tool in Italy to help them learn. The problem is that to build a concept map, you have to understand the text you want to build the map on first. And they cannot read the text the same way it is written. So they usually have to be helped by teachers or by tutors or by parents, which either lack of time or the lack of competencies in supporting them. Moreover, this way they will never be autonomous. So building Algor in building our Algor maps, we thought about a way of making them autonomous and also saving them sometimes by automating some part of their work. This is only the first step that we wish to make in that direction, because our vision in the future is, whether you are a parent or you are a teacher or you're a tutor or you're a student, of course, you should not worry about going to school or about sending your son or your daughter to school. You should not worry that you will find a place where his talents will be expressed, or a place that will take into account all his peculiarities, from his difficulties to his talents, because the system by itself, by design, should be designed in such a way that it embeds tools such as the one that I just presented, that will help everyone express its full potential. We want to make the education equal for granted, and we are convinced that the technology that is present today, that is ready today, is one of the most effective ways to do it. It is not something that people should be scared of or should feel far from, but something that can enhance their everyday life.
Okay, Fabio, really clear and really strong message, quite interesting. Again, a social application, but that rely a lot on new trends of artificial intelligence. So, Jean-Eric, now I want to repeat, because this is, to be clear, we are not going to discuss about project. This is not the objective of the discussion that will follow, but it was just a way to present the guys.
Unfortunately, because they are all three of them super interesting, and really rather remarkable.
But I will give you the floor for a few comments if you want to give, and after that I would like to give again the floor for a broad general discussion that in any case these young people would like to address to you. Let's say a sort of question statement. But please, Jean-Eric, if you have some kind of statement about what you listen, don't.
No, I just wanted to say that to Ivana that her local work is a little bit what I was trying to say myself with the city's mission, that it is the inhabitants of the city which need to drive their own transformation, and this is really very much what you are doing in your own city. You didn't say which city it was. That's the only thing which I was missing. It's in Basilicata, I understood, but the city itself, I don't know the name. What was it?
The name is Brassano.
Brassano, okay.
It's a town. It's a small town, yeah.
I retained the name just in case they apply for the climate neutral cities. How big is Brassano?
No,
it's very small. It's actually 5,000 inhabitants.
Yeah, so that's probably a bit too small for that European level type of project. But I think what we will do in the climate mission might also be interesting for your own work. So try if you can, including maybe with the help of APRE, to stay connected to the deployment of the city's mission. But drawing up on the resources of your fellow inhabitants, I think is really the way to carry the transformation of a city. I mean, Giulia, your concept is of course particularly powerful and disruptive. I'm insisting on both powerful and disruptive.
Thank you.
Disruptive, I think, is also what you need to take into account to make progress. You will have progress through your company, no doubt. The challenge is, of course, very much to scale up and to then in the change which you are recommending, which I can recognize in a number of other economic authors. I don't know if you're familiar with Kate Raworth, for example, which wrote a book called The Donut Economy. She is a British economist, but she's arguing, as you are doing, that a traditional economic theory, even if there are many of those, does not necessarily to capture the challenges of our time, which is to produce inclusive and developed societies whilst preserving the limitations of our own planet. And so how do you change our economic, largely liberal economic system fast enough is really the challenge of disruption to get there. And I would argue from where I sit, you will not be surprised to hear it, but this is where you are in a much better place to be disruptive probably than I am, is that I would argue that you need to change from inside, so to speak. So we need to change the indicators. We need to move away from simply looking at growth through the limited notion of GDP growth, as we are doing all the time, including because we need to deal with public debt, which is erased in part by GDP growth. We need to look much more at welfare, at employment, at the quality of education, and I think that's really one of the boundaries on which to work. But your approach, including connecting it very concretely to the circular economy, makes a lot of sense. So the more of us you get into your own thinking, notably to move out of the rather short-sighted consumerism, which we all are actors of. I don't think I'm better than anyone else, honestly. The more you will have impact. So very, very impressive. I hope Vuesa will kick off also with commercial success. And then lastly, Fabio, to you, this is quite amazing. If you really manage to scale up your concept, you will make obviously a major difference, because as you rightly say, all of us learn differently, but many of us are challenged, and more than a minority are challenged by the way knowledge is passed over by our traditional systems, and this is a global challenge. This is not a European one at all. The more we will be able to learn to become actors of our transformation as well. What would have interested me in a deeper conversation, Fabio, is who draws up the algorithms? Because
it's not actually me by myself. It's one of the person of my team which invented it. So
how does it? I mean, okay, but to really make a difference, you need psychologists, you need you need teachers, you probably need the students themselves, and you of course need to work to ensure that you avoid too many biases. So the algorithm is a particularly impactful, but also, of course, highly tricky ethically as well, by the way, but you know that instrument. But your ambition is really well put and quite impressive. Voilà, that's what I wanted to briefly say.
Okay, thanks a lot, Jean-Eric. Sorry, but we are running out of time, so I would like to give you the floor to have a short dialogue in any case, because we are working these last weeks with our colleagues, young colleagues, and we have identified a group of questions or statements that we would like to put on the table. We have not the time to go to all the three. So please, this is a message to both. We start from Ivana, Giulia, and Fabio after that. Let's start with one of the statements that we have selected among the two that we have for both. So, Ivana, if you would like to start with your first statement. Again, this is not a statement from Ivana. This is a statement that is part of the discussion from all the young. And so don't focus on the names, but look to them as a group of young, representative of young generation. Ivana.
Of course, yes, I will be brief. Mr. You have mentioned before that the young people will have a key role in Horizon Europe. So I'm going to ask you, next year, 2022, will be the European Year of Youth. How can young people contribute with their ideas and views to the activities of the European Commission under Horizon Europe?
Yeah, firstly, the European Year of Youth was, the principle of it was announced just a few weeks ago by Frau Ursula von der Leyen, the President of the Commission, during her State of the Union speech early September. So we are still busy designing this European Year of Youth. And so input into this design phase is highly welcome to begin with. You should not hesitate, any of you, to guide us in constructing that European Year of Youth. At the outset, it is very much driven by the pandemic and by the impact the pandemic has had, across our societies, but disproportionately on your generation. Both in terms of development perspectives, professionally or personally. It is not natural at any age, but particularly when you are, between 15 and 25, to be deprived from mobility and to see your immediate perspectives so curtailed. So there is a big impact on the mental state of our younger generations driven by the pandemic. I would here argue, and there has been just now a rather remarkable study, which was, I think, coordinated out of Exeter, a UK university, a survey of nearly 80,000 young people across 10 countries, and it's a global one, not just in Europe, also Africa and Latin America, which identified climate anxiety as a key driver also of mental disorders, in particular in the younger generation, with the anxiety that the future is being taken from them. More than 50% of younger people are saying that this is really impacting their mental well-being. So we need to look at that as well. And if I can just make a side comment here, one of the, for me, most worrying dimension of that study is that in your generation, and this is certainly a discussion in Italy, I know, you find that decision makers, be it politicians or other actors, are simply not delivering real and concrete outcomes. So you don't trust them to make a difference in the needed accelerated transformation on climate. I mean, to in a nutshell, blah blah blah, as Greta Thunberg said so spectacularly a few days ago. I mean, not in Glasgow. She said it again in Glasgow, but I think she said it in Milano, and in one of the pre-COP meetings. And I think we need to because this is really going at the heart of at least the representative democracy, which is what our societies are built on, and is contesting it very radically and in very, very large parts of society, of the younger part of our society. So that's something we need to deal with. So whether Horizon Europe as one framework program can deal with that, of course not. But it provides a number of areas where we are, I hope, relevant in interacting with all of that. I mean, firstly, Horizon Europe is essentially, I mean, not entirely, but essentially about supporting Europe's transformation into a green society and in a green economy, combining biodiversity and environmental degradation, which is under-discussed, but which is deeply impacting on the quality of life, our well-being, and our future, and climate change. So the entire construction of the program is about that. And we are trying, and we need to make this as we move forward even more practical. We are trying then within the program to define research topics, engaging with actors across Europe. So we're doing it particularly with research organizations and scientists, but more and more we are trying, and I hope we will do better over the years ahead, to also discuss it on a broader basis with the European population, including young people. So I cannot be concrete in inviting you to a specific meeting, but we organize every year research and innovation days, which are open, which is a fully open event. I mean, we had more than 30,000 people in the last event last year. We'll have it again in June 2022. And I very much hope that we will have more young people and more representatives from the population to be present to discuss with scientists and ourselves as we identify research priorities. I'm not going to cover again the missions. I gave the example of the cities mission, but for all 5 missions, oceans, soils, climate adaptation, and cancer, their detailed implementation plan is to be discussed and drawn up with citizens. And again, I can only encourage, and this will be done in member states, largely at local level, regions or cities. I can only encourage you to be part of that design process. You will have a major impact there. And I finish with one last example, which is not so operational yet, but I hope to see more of it, which is that you are part of a conversation on science choices. I said it in my introduction, but let me give you one example. I am, as you can hear, I think, extremely ambitious on ensuring that science makes a difference on restoring our environment and ensuring that we deal with climate change. Of course, Europe alone will not be decisive, but will lead, I think, the rest of the world. So that's, you take this for given that I am, if you want, the greenest of green champions from that point of view. But at the same time, I also strongly believe that we need to use all elements of science to achieve that. And there is a very toxic discussion for reasons which I can completely understand, and where as citizens I sometimes have even sympathy with, which is on genetically modified organisms, which has now polluted another technology which is called gene editing. I don't know how familiar you are with that, which is CRISPR-Cas, which is a new technology where you can deal with a gene, where you can cut the genome sequence. You don't change the DNA, but you can rearrange it differently. And that technology has many different applications, of course, very well framed with a very powerful ethical framework in Europe on this technology applied to illnesses and to the human being. I'm not discussing that, but it's also technology which is applied more and more to plants, so plant gene editing. And I would argue that if we want to deal with the climate change, if we also want to deal with climate adaptation, because climate change, you've seen it, we know it is happening already, we need new types of plants. And so we need to use CRISPR-Cas and gene editing to devise plants of the future. So if these plants are devised in a lab, or worse, devised by industry alone, they will be suspect. You will find them dangerous. You will not buy into that new technology. However, if the purpose of that gene editing is discussed with citizens, and if you tell us we are not interested in a plant which can use a pesticide, we are interested in a plant which uses only 10% of water compared to the equivalent today, it's a completely different use of the technology. And I would argue would make that technology much more acceptable across society, and then in turn the use of the plant much more acceptable for society. That's the type of discussions, science by science and nearly research by research, which I think in many cases needs your presence, your guidance, so that the choices made are not done as said, in labs or in industry, but with society, that they can then be also better used by society. So 3 broad examples, Marco.
Yes, sure, and thanks. We have a few minutes, but if you allow me, Jean-Eric, I would like to give again the floor to Giulia and maybe to Fabio. Can you just address the sentence, we have 2 main points that we discussed, and try to ask Jean-Eric to have a common answer to both. So Giulia, would you like to pick up one of the statements that we have discussed along? And to address, and after that, Fabio, you do the same, and we give the floor in conclusion to Jean-Eric for a final reply. So we have no times, but we mix together these 2 statements that was relevant. Please, Giulia.
Yes, of course. I want to focus on the recent COVID-19 pandemic because it has brought out the more and more strong reliance environment and society. And Horizon Europe has also stated its relevance and the gap among these 3 pillars. And we know that science is the key for any major transition, but I want to ask you how non-scientists, citizens can contribute and engage with the scientists for all the society transitions we need to preserve our world, our health, and our economy.
Yeah, excellent.
Okay, Fabio?
Yeah, on my side, I'd like to ask you, we were talking about innovation before, and nowadays innovation obviously goes through technologies. We address technologies such as disruptive and cutting edge and also complex technology. As you were saying before, to bring innovation to society, we need a cooperation process between technicians and population. Yeah. But this approach can only be true if under the assumption that there is the willing to cooperate between those 2 sides. So how do we make them willing to cooperate when usually they do not understand each other, especially, for example, where if the population you want to bring, the people you want to bring the innovation to do not understand fully the technology and is scared of the technology, especially in a world like that where you luckily, you cannot control the sources of information through which they actually get information from.
Yeah, wow. Anything more difficult as a question, maybe, from both of you? Thank you very much. I mean, the two questions are in fact deeply related. So I think it was good to have them now together. I think indeed what I set out a moment ago in why I believe that we need to find ways for scientists to dialogue with society when they make science choices is not easy. It is not easy because you need firstly to ensure that you have interlocutors which are on the one hand knowledgeable or which can be trained or where you can also help them with a bit of effort on both sides to understand the scientific choices at hand. But at the same time, this group needs to be also legitimate to the population more generally. So just taking a master's in biology is not going to help anyone. That's, they will certainly understand, but that's not going to help anyone because, as I said early on, the challenge is firstly to do that effort of engaging and accepting that your choices, the choices you make as a scientist or a policymaker in research are guided and therefore curtailed by the dialogue with society. This then needs to be credible outside. And so the composition of the group of those we engage with is absolutely essential. And that is, we are still learning on how best to do that. And the three phases: find the right interlocutors ready to do it, and help them get to the knowledge level that the dialogue makes sense, then listen, and then show credibly and largely that this has taken place, so that the effort then also carries the science process forward in society. I mean, there are here elements of social innovation which are very much part of many research programs in Europe, very much in Horizon Europe. You will see that in most of not in most, that's not completely true. It's possible in all of them, but it's specifically identified in a let's say about a third of the research topics which are right now out there, where research organizations will team up and offer and come in with a proposal to carry out the research. About a third of these research topics can be very technological subjects: agriculture, climate, energy and transport, health. And we have specifically identified for them the need to have a social component, social innovation component, so that maybe colleagues in sociology or social sciences more generally can team up with scientists and find then the channels to interact with society in this meaningful way, which I tried to describe early on. So it's a key component of the rollout of Horizon Europe, and we are arguing with member states that this also becomes much more systematic as they deliver funding for their research priorities at national level. That was, of course, remains essential for the pandemic and the post-pandemic. And there were here two aspects in the questions, and which I would like to distinguish, or at least I heard two aspects in the question, which I would like to distinguish. I mean, firstly, it's the science behind the pandemic response itself. And this comes back also to the environment of social media and the very fluid environment allowing fake news to become so much used. But also, I think there's one dimension which we often underestimate in our communication, is that our societies are changing quite a lot. And if I look at surveys, I'm French, as you hear, but in France, for example, there's more than 50% of people which believe either in astronomy, in numerology, in one of these 5, 7, or 8 key areas, and which is replacing progressively the more classical distinction between science and church, if you want. And these are people which also, to an extent, agree that science exists, but they're more and more also looking at these type of spiritual environments. So fair enough. I'm just making the point. And this, of course, is not therefore an easy environment within which the hard truth of science can be easily communicated. It's not just fake news, it's also that our societies are quite deeply changing. So we need to find indeed the way to ensure that we can communicate the science properly. And during the pandemic, I don't know how you saw it in Italy. You were, of course, in a very, very difficult spot at the beginning of the pandemic. The first wave was so particularly traumatic in your country. But what I observed is that during the first 6 months, science was really having a lot of space, and there was a lot of faith in science helping society overcome the pandemic. And that, I think, was highly positive. Then we moved in the second phase in a slightly more difficult moment where this fake news environment and the description of society I made earlier on played a big part, but also where scientists were probably not able to explain well enough that science is not about absolute truth. Science is about a method of confronting reality. It's a scientific method to come out with proposals, solutions which are well-founded in realities, but not necessarily a single universal truth. And therefore there were divergences and also heated exchanges between scientists, and that has not helped, I think, the place of science to drive better policy making in particular, and better choices driven by science. So I regret that second phase a bit. Okay, that's where we are. To be also said in the pandemic context, and I will then say a word on the transformation, is that science is lifting us out of the pandemic. I suppose that most of you are well aware that the vaccine, the BioNTech vaccine, which you call, I think, Pfizer in Italy, is a European vaccine, which was entirely developed by European scientists, with European science, with European funding. And it is a completely disruptive technology based on fundamental research, which was repurposed in record time without cutting any corner, I hasten to add, to provide that vaccine on a very large scale and on a global scale as well. Europe has produced 2 billion vaccines over the last year, 2 billion. 1 billion was exported and 1 billion used in the EU. So we exported, half of the production went outside of Europe, contrary to other vaccine producers on the other side of the Atlantic, which kept it in the territory, at least for the greater part of the year. So that is a real science-driven health policy, industrial, and I hope social success as well. Now, in Italy, like everywhere else in the Union, there are still many which are not taking the vaccine. It's a very difficult conversation, which is not easy to have, neither for scientists nor for policymakers, so I'm not going to dwell on it too much right now. But it is no doubt the case that we need to continue to showcase it's not even the balance of risk and benefits. There is no balance. I mean, the risk of COVID and the benefit of the vaccine, it's like up there and down there. But okay, it still needs to be repeated and repeated and repeated, and hopefully the vaccine will mitigate to a large extent the impact of the continued infections which we are seeing everywhere in the EU, and a therapy hopefully will be available at some point in the rather near future, from what I understand right now. What you said was connecting also the pandemic with the biodiversity loss and the climate challenge, or well, catastrophe more than challenge, and how we can combine it. I mean, again, in the first pandemic, I think we all expected that our societies would deeply change out of the experience of the lockdown, and that having seen firsthand what our behavior as a species means for us, not just for the planet, but for ourselves, in a retro loop of that virus on the species itself. Well, as I think we can all see today, this is not happening on a big scale. So we absolutely need to ensure that we combine both the disruptive energy which you bring and ideas which you bring with the capacity of leaders. And at the EU, I think you should be critical, but you should also be proud of what the EU is doing. We are the only part of the world which is effectively setting targets and acting on them. I can accept that part of it sounds a bit like blah, blah, blah. Part of it is maybe not impactful enough. I would certainly find many areas where I would want more myself, but we are doing it. And we need to combine your energy, your disruptive energy, and then support the leaders which globally are really trying to make a difference. And science is informing it and supporting it, in particular the science which is carried by the population. Voilà, that's maybe a way to close. Marco.
Yes, thanks a lot, Jean-Ric, and as usual, too many elements to comments, but unfortunately the time is over, so I would like to move to the conclusion, and I would like to thank you again, Jean-Ric. I would like to thank you, Ivana. I would like to thank you, Giulia, and thank you, Fabio. Again, we are aware discussions like that are more symbolic than concrete, as in any kind of conference like that. But the symbolic items sometimes are just the tip of the iceberg. and we are committed not only with the tip of the iceberg, but with all the other part of the iceberg. Next year has been already said, will be the year of the youth, and APRE, together with Agenzia Nazionale Giovani, and maybe with Ashoka, why not, to continue in our challenge, our adventure, to bring the idea of Horizon Europe Ambassador and to contribute to have young generation fully involved, not only as a scientist, but as a citizen in Horizon Europe. And that is our dream even for the next year. So thanks a lot for your contribution. I'm going to close now. The only things that remain to do for me is just remind you that the conference is not over. We have just started with our first days, and we'll continue for the other days during the week until Friday. And tomorrow we will start again with a public live session at 11 o'clock, if I'm not wrong, yes, at 11 o'clock with a second dialogue on proposal evaluation. And we will have Matthias Will from the Director of Common Implementation Center, together with Guido Saracco, who is the Direttore del Politecnico di Milano, and with one of the Director of Department of CNR, with that will be part of the discussion. So we are going to close, but we start at 11 with a public session, but don't forget that as far as concerned the APRE members, we will have at starting at 9:30 and the first APRE space that will be dedicated to networking. So this is clearly closed just to the is a discussion and is workshops just for the members, and we will see with all the other publics at 11 o'clock tomorrow. Thanks a lot for your contribution, and see you soon.